I'm sorry for the interruption. So let's get back to our little contemplation on how we can go about creating our own vintage soul and boom bap samples from scratch, and not just think about what we would need for sound selection, but what are the characteristics that vintage soul and boom bap encapsulate. So one of the first things that we could do is we could create a template. Or probably we should create a template that helps us to create the sound more easy and faster. So creating a template of a vintage soul ensemble would be kind of a good first step to do. That way we are very versatile. Let's look at this recent template, for instance. Let's go by mixer channels. So we hear one channel is the voice, obviously, that you hear right now. We have a parallel channel here for the reverb. I like to have a dedicated reverb for the vocals that is combined with a compressor with sidechaining to the input. So the reverb kind of ducks a little bit whenever there's signal coming in, and when there's none, the reverb tail gets to extend and breathe a little more without drowning out the original signal. Parallel processing generally is always your friend. Also, certainly it does help a lot working in Reason for this vintage sound. Not that Reason is old or anything, Reason is state of the art, but as you see, this emulation of an SSL mixer is very helpful in recreating and emulating the vintage sound, as these SSL units have been used on so many of the recordings that we consider vintage. As I said before, next to all the where is that my notes now? Next to the sound selection, what we would typically hear for instrumentation, the sonic characteristic is probably what it is that gives us the most feeling of it, especially maybe vinyl. If you listen closely, you can hear a little bit of white noise and vinyl crackle, because there is an vinyl emulation on the master bus, which I encourage you also to use. It doesn't have to be this particular unit. There are many vinyl emulations, and you don't have to use a lot. A little goes a long way. I probably already used too much. Also, what is probably also most recognizable is just the sound of tape. If you have been born in a certain age, you are probably very familiar with the sound of tape. Tape is just wonderful. It makes everything blend together so much more nicely. We have options like crosstalk, that is actually an undesirable effect where the frequency bands or left and right are bleeding into one another. That kind of really saturates the sound and you get more bottom end and more top end shine, which is amazing. You can reduce the tape speed, and that will lead, of course, to a little bit diminished sound quality. Higher frequencies cannot be replicated as well when the tape speed is lower. There are different kinds of tapes that all have their own a little bit unique. Some may be a little brighter, some may be a little darker, and whatnot. You could totally remove the headroom and hear how the signal and saturation will lead to a lot of distortion, like it would be a really old or damaged unit. Listen to how there's this kind of even more than proximity effect. You can really hear and see how the saturation goes insane as we've reduced the headroom artificially. But let's look at our little band that we can put together. Also, all these little imperfections, they accumulate. Lately, I've come to, especially with drums, I'm not quite sure if the analogy is quite right or if I have understood the sampling method of round robin correctly, but if you're somewhat familiar how samplers of instruments work, especially the better ones, where there's multiple samples for one keystroke, where there's a random generator, so it sounds just more live and not as static. If you have one-shot samples in your drum sampler, you can use tape emulation to get a little bit more variety by adjusting the tape stability. So when you have it a little bit randomized, sometimes you will have a drum hit that is a little bit higher. Sometimes you will have a drum hit that's a little bit lower. That is kind of a little bit cheating to have somewhat more than just one hit on your one shot. And if we listen to a drummer play, even if he is a really tight player, he will sometimes hit a little harder, a little softer, not the same position, angle. They all are unique hits and sounds. You get me? With some modulation, you have a little bit more out of your one shots. Okay, what else is in here that is good? Let's look at our instrumentation. As I said, probably with vintage soul and all the stuff, what do we have? We have electric keys, a lot. A lot of this nostalgia feel is electric keys, be it some super classical units that have been used forever, especially 80s keyboards that, like, it was a revolution back then and they were used everywhere. That's why we recall them for that time. Or just a classical piano. Okay, I locked it to the wrong device. Lock this to Keyscape. So what does our little template look like? We have a piano, of course, for basic writing. And what else do we have? We have an organ. We'll show music theory later when we work on something specifically. That is also a very characteristic sound for the time. That actually is really cool. Sometimes I can't believe this is a synthesizer. I've listened to a lot of Jimmy Smith, and the sound of a Hammond B3 organ is ingrained into my brain. And this unit does an amazing job modeling it. Anyway, let's continue with our band. What else is in our virtual band, our virtual vintage ensemble? That will be the backbone for our songwriting, our sketches. We have a choir because vintage soul needs to have that choir. What great soul record can live without the backing choir that sings dreamy harmonies and call and response in stereo ping pong and round and reverb? So for this to mimic it, we are using I believe it's a Rompler of some sort. I can't exactly say what Humana is. Sound Iron is probably familiar to some of you, or maybe many. They are a very good developer. I believe probably a plugin that is more known is their emotional piano. But Humana, for a reason, has been out forever, I think. I'm not quite sure, but I believe it is a stock Reason unit if you're a Reason user. But if you're not a Reason user, like, I always love to think about it. The DAW that you use doesn't matter. It is just a bunch of methods that may be helpful for you to create. Use them in your own fashion. Okay, so let's listen to Humana and play some backup choir harmonies. And actually, with that, we can start getting to town. Maybe we have to reduce the volume of this choir a little bit, but let's lock this. We are playing a two-chord progression as a vamp, and just to start our sing, let's say we want this choir to be our starting point. We want a nostalgia choir that screams minor modes. Okay. So what couldn't we do? Let's see. Or maybe we need another chord. And we could have put it through a little bit more reverb to give it some more interesting feel. Let's give it some space delay reverb. Let's see how that sounds. Just going chromatically through some minor chords. Not just minor. Not sure what we're gonna do. Let's just record something and see where it leads, and maybe we will find something. We will find something. I haven't even chosen a tempo yet. Let's noodle a little and see where it goes. Let's noodle and see where it goes. Sometimes you have to noodle a little. I'm not quite sure where we're going with this. I have to switch to the piano. It's easier for me to write that way. Sorry, but we're gonna write this with the choir. Shifting a little bit too much randomly through these harmonies, looking for something. Diminished chords are your best friends, by the way. If you want to make something also sound old, harmonically speaking, listen to some of these classic jazz and blues, soul, gospel ballads. Like, you know. we in? I think we're Dorian, are we? What mode are we in? Friggin'. So we are actually in oh my god, I can't speak. We are in F major. That's our parent scale. But we play mostly D minor, which is the parallel minor of F major. I'm sorry. Or Aeolian, just another fancy name. And playing these notes, but starting on the third degree, looking from the parent scale F major, we get this scale, which is a nice and dreamy, interesting little scale. Let's just play the root in our left and just improvise with the rest of the scale. This A flat is not necessarily in the scale, but we use it as a slide note chromatically. That's a very typical sound of Phrygian. And keep the root steady to really focus in on the root tonic. Let's write a little sketch. We're gonna start with the piano maybe and not with the strings. We're gonna just try to play this 2-chord progression, and then we're gonna try to join in with the choir. Let's make a little weird, dreamy, gloomy thing. And what did I say? What mode we're in? That should be A Phrygian, right? Right. Okay, let's get a click track going so we don't get lost. Still haven't decided on a tempo yet. Let's see if we can work with this. Let's just use a simple 2-chord progression as a starting point, and then we build the rest on top and see what develops. Okay, let me play that again. Why is it also always trying to track there? I don't get that. Missed my cue. What do we want to play? We want to play. What we're just gonna do something simple. Oh, I forgot. I didn't want to move the root, right? We want to really anchor that we are in Phrygian. Keep the root. Haha. If we only could hit the one, that would be amazing. Let's do that again. We were really not running out of time. What is my count? What am I counting? And 1 and 2, 1 and 2, 1. You know, it helps if you can count as a musician. I can't count, unfortunately. And 1 and 2 and 3, 4. And 1 and 2. How am I gripping this? What is my count? Let's say we can't decide for a tempo. That we could also do. We could do this 3 meter. And actually, that will contribute sometimes even more because we kind of will have swing time by accident. It just can't be helped. If you don't quantize and don't record to a click, there will be some interesting timing irregularities. The more voices you record, the more there will be a new pocket developing, just natural. Like it would happen with live players. So it may take often much more time than using quantization. But if you do record your sketch or track without quantization, you really get much more from your mock-up vintage recording. And it can free you up to really go by the feel. If you can't decide on a tempo, don't force it. We will find out the tempo later. Let's focus on a simple idea or groove. Well, let's start that on the right note. That should not be a problem. Like, it doesn't have to be something complicated, nothing super fancy. Let's just cut that off. Let's say probably the last was okay. Let's put this back to the 1 so we don't have to scroll forever. So this is our shell. What did we say we wanted to do? We wanted to do something with a choir. We wanted big, mellow, and dramatic, right? So we do something in A Phrygian. So this is our first part. Piano. Now we're gonna go to choir. And with the choir we're doing the same thing. We will be focusing on the Phrygian mode. Gonna do something like that. Right now I'm listening back and thinking if this choir is not maybe way too loud, or if it isn't doing too much, because we will keep adding. Just add a little bit at a time. And I think the choir is maybe not just being too loud, it is taking up too much space, harmonically and melodically. Yeah, these chords are too big and too long. We basically just wanted to go maybe okay, maybe not that motion, but you know what I mean. Maybe even octave lower. That's pretty diatonic. Maybe we're not ready to record. Let's find an idea that we can use in context with our piano shell. I want something simple and steady like that. No fast motions. Just something that is complementary. Next thing that I hear would be maybe some vintage strings. What could we do with these strings except the very obvious octave pedal? Maybe we do the very obvious octave pedal. We're gonna do the octave thing. Yeah, but we tried to do it with a little bit better articulation and dynamics, as I cannot control the volume fader at the moment because I'm showing the music theory. We need to be a bit better with our velocity. Now, where's that coming from? So gonna be playing a figure like from our Phrygian. We're gonna be doing octaves going from our 1 to the 5 to the 4, and then I haven't really completely decided on the cadence. That would be kind of very typical run. We go 1, 5, 4, 7, 6, 2, 2, 1. We could do that. Let's see. Let's not record yet. We're just gonna get in the zone. I think I might want to jump around. Maybe we're gonna go 1, 5, 4, 7. Jump around here. I kind of like this. Da 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 da. Let's see. Okay. I think we're gonna stick to this. We go. Okay, maybe even with that trill. Show you on the piano, it's easier to hear. I'm gonna play. We're gonna exploit this frigid mode. Okay, let's not get too excited. I know, it's a little bit rigid. Usually I apply the volume fader. Let's listen to that and see how we feel about that, and probably we then have to start doing some panning because this is rather mono for the band. Well, the strings are on the left, brass that we don't hear yet is on the right, keys are center, and so is our choir. And I'm not quite sure if the choir maybe needs to move a little bit out of the way of the strings. We'll see about that. If we're not putting in brass, I think we gonna leave the choir on the right, but we may put in some brass, and then I want the brass to be on the right and the choir center. So let's pan that back and see what else we might be adding to this before we start making our first sample and see what we could do with this. And a little bit of ear candy here and there, maybe some distant percussion or like as if the band is just about to come together, you know? Let's take this and put it on this. We're gonna take this now as is. We don't have to over perfect anything, especially if we are doing maybe micro sampling. It can be a little bit loose. If you know that you will be chopping your sample up to the grid, then you will want to have your source material much more tidy, as working otherwise later will be not so enjoyable. But if you are doing a lot of boom bop and finger drumming and you do micro sampling, if you're creating your own samples, do not waste too much time making it super tidy. These imperfections will have the most beautiful happy accidents later. I guarantee it. I did something wrong here. I dragged the wrong MIDI clip, didn't I? Yes, I did. Let's get this MIDI clip to the strings and automate the volume fader. If we think it's really necessary, but I think it is. Yeah, we better automate this fader. Look how much nicer it is. Even really just this one note. We could have used an A for 8 bars or 12 bars. How long is this? Why is this 12 bars? Anyway, let's not worry too much about this. We were for meter, we didn't choose a tempo. That's why. That's why it's an weird number. Let's just also make our string volume so we have some dynamic. Think about it like playing like a string player would play, like with bow change, and in the fashion that you can picture these bow movements happening, that is kind of the same fashion of your volume automation curve, so to speak. Hope that makes sense. If I say some nonsense, somebody stop me. Okay, what we're gonna do, we're gonna automate these strings, right? That's right. Okay, let's go about this. Okay, let's join these automation clips and see if we have to do some cleanup. I think it's okay. Let's listen back what we got. Okay, we did something to one voice that we didn't do to the others. Why does it not sound like it's a coherent space? They are not using the same vent effect. They don't all have to, but it's good if you want to create a sonically cohesive room, sharing delay and reverb across devices can help to facilitate that easier. Same as grouping and bussing, maybe with some tape modulation or some healthy compression and saturation, can achieve similar things. Let's put the strings through this weird replay and exaggerate the effect. If I'm listening for effects and how much is too much, do a stutter of start and stops to listen for your delay and reverb tails. And you're just gonna keep messing with your decay settings, feedback settings, until you're satisfied with when your delayed signal or reverb tail stops. But we are going to dial back on this as we are wanting to create more voices. We will be using a more a cleaner reverb and not something that does so much modulation. We will be doing a lot of tape compression and distortion, and we have already some wow and flutter going on in the master that we do not necessarily want that. We still want to be able to, when we flip the sample, that it is not so completely detuned that we can't add more voices, or that it will get difficult because it is of such low fidelity now that a tonality or a pitch is too unstable. And well, yeah, when you just do no added drums, or if you do not intend to add more, that can be okay, but do not mess up the sound ultimately if you intend to do more messing up with it. Kind of just a healthy common sense thing to do. Leave some headroom for more games. Talking of headroom, let's meter this. I'm gonna mute my voice so we can actually have a more reliable reading than also recording the noise floor and me bubbling in this untreated room. All right. Now let's listen a little bit and maybe add some little ear candy here and there, a little wind chime, maybe a little bit of percussion, some little things here and there. Maybe we are going to add a little bit of a mellotron trumpet. Let's see, we're gonna play. I might as well use contact for this, then we have a real brass section. And let's look at this mixer. Did I pan it? No, that wasn't panned, but it sounded so off. Anyway, let's use session horns to have some brass. Let's see. What does brass usually do? Fifths and fourths, right? Ba, 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 da. We have to be careful that we're not doing Star Wars. I'm gonna do Star Wars. But that's in B flat. Anyway, before we get lost trying to recreate Star Wars, let's do what we are supposed to do. Let's find maybe some horn steps in A Phrygian for our Zulu vintage whatever. Not so sure what we're gonna do. What we're gonna do? Ba-da, ba-da, da. No, not so busy. Da, 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 da. Da, ba, da, da, da. Ba, da, ba, da, da, da. Da, 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 da. Well, let's see. Da, 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 da. Ba-da-ba-da, ba-da-ba-da-ba. As I say, it doesn't have to be perfect. Let's just keep this and keep going. And do a test sampling. And see if we can also always see if we're clipping. Maybe we're clipping. You add more voices, you get more volume. Keep that in check. Volume inflation is a problem. What's happening right there? It was not intended. Also, I have to take a break. I should be eating something, and then we resume it, and we go deep with sampling games. We're gonna play Sampleception. We'll have to do some gain staging, maybe some basic EQing, but it's fine for now. Let's keep going and add maybe a couple of more little things. Let's do some non-harmonic sounds, except maybe this wind chime. But let's add some funky percussions here and there wherever we feel like. Let's see. But I think we want this wind chime to at the beginning, or almost just a little bit. Ever so slightly. I think we can do this with the finger jiggle. We can always mute stuff if it's not working out. Well, brass is a little bit random and doing too much. I already considered it somewhat annoying. We will fix that later. Oh, that's the one that has a little longer decay. Oh no, that's not what we want to do. Don't want to mess with the tempo, no. Just want to go back a little bit. Let's see. da, da, da. Just a little bit here and there, something weird, some bleeps, some blips, some snippets of interest. Let me look at this instrument. I'm not quite sure what keys are actually playing. I think I'm an octave too low or too high. Can do fun stuff. Anyway, let's continue working. Let's record some of that. I'm sorry, that's true. You know what? We're gonna do an early sample game. Probably gonna track some guitar. Guitar is always cool, especially guitar with delay and with wah and whatnot. But I have to take a little break. But let's sample it and see what we could do. Also, let's add a new mimic. This one is full. That is the wrong color. Okay. So, what else? It's going in the sample bus. And on the sample bus, we have probably the best stuff for making samples. That is, once we have made our vintage soul mock-up recording with all the good tricks, we use tape compression, vinyl crackle, wow, and flutter. We use distortion. We use the cue to take some top end off. We are putting stuff in vintage spring reverbs and stereo echoes and whatnot. And now that we are sampling it, when we play back that sample, the sample bus has a bit crusher on it, Decimore. Doesn't really matter what bit crusher you use. I like really using this one. It is followed by a multi-band distortion unit by the same brand, Devastator 2. I can recommend all these plugins that I'm using, but I'm not the guy who wants to be on gear YouTube. I don't want to be reviewing gear and plugins and synthesizers. That's not interesting. That gets old real fast. The only thing that's, I think, truly interesting are methods to create. It's not learning a recipe that you can follow once and then you always have the same meal. It's learning a method and some basic fundamentals so you can reinvent the wheel on your own fashion. That's what it's all about. So, yeah, we're going to use this to give our sampled material some more lo-fi characteristic. Like I'm producing in 84 kilohertz, but our sample will be reduced to 12 bits, and we are downsampling to about 26 kilohertz, which is around the SP 1200. Also, a very good thing is like if you are somewhat of an audio engineer or sound designer, and you're trying to mimic a certain sound from scratch, and it is an analog sound, look up the unit and look at the specs. Often it will tell you pretty much exactly what frequency range it has. And when you do your sound design and want to recreate that, you have a rough outline what it can be. If you know there was no more than 10 kilohertz, then you know where to set your filters. It's kind of pretty much that simple. Okay, let's get going and sample our thing and listen to how dirty and cool it might sound when we put this through the good old stuff, you know, the hibbity hobbity. Okay, unfortunately, our sample is slightly longer than Mimic can hold, but this is maybe really just for our testing out. We could render the sample and put it into Serato or whatnot, or we could chop it up and record it in different parts or in different mimics. There's a myriad of ways anything can be done really anytime. So let's listen and play back our Mimic sample capture and see what kind of sonic textures we can get out of it once we start really going to town with our usual bread and butter options as sample flippers. We're gonna slice it up nice and easy by transients. Serato does the same thing for us, or we do it manually, however we like. Let's listen to what we have. Let's put this on advanced mode. I like all the modes. I'm using tape, advanced, and granular probably the most. And advanced is especially cool as with tape you have, of course, if you change speed, you change pitch and vice versa. And with advanced, you are independent with time stretching and pitch shifting. can get some real grim atmosphere out of that. Let's listen to a generic click track for some boom bap just to see how it could feel. Of course, we would be doing our own finger drumming to have it legit, but just so we can test out where our sample might go, let's start listening already, tweaking it, listening to a click track and tweaking. Let's put some low pass filter on that. Let's reduce the resonance and turn up the drive. Also, let's do one more thing to give us more the feeling like we'd be flipping a sample. We will reduce this delay depending on our source material, but let's put a little bit of tape echo on our sample bus so we can play choppy, but we will have a little bit of reverb tail, and the sample is not super dry when we release it. See how much that makes a difference? It has so much more atmosphere. We just need to be careful that we are not creating too much signal or feedback. It will, as I said, depend mostly on your source material, how much of this delay you can get away with. Let's turn our click track back on and keep messing with our temporary vintage sample and keep messing with it until we feel happy we have achieved something that sounds legit, old, and groovy. Let's give it some compression. And let's give it back some of its volume that we took out. And especially like if you listen to Wu-Tang and all the good stuff, if you pitch down percussions especially and slow them down like hell, they always sound like they are, I don't know, Shaolin swords. Use percussion, finger jingles, sleigh bells, pitch them down, make it super slow, and play them like one shot. It sounds like, or like this vibra slap that we used. It sounds like so grim when it's slow and pitched down. Da pa pa pa. I feel like we're gonna make a beat for MF Doom. Let's give it more drive. Oh, we don't want that. Let's increase the speed, it's hella slow. I like this. like where this is going. Ba 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 ba. Mad villain. I don't know. I'm thinking of MF Doom. I don't know who you're thinking of, but I think this is kind of like an MF Doom jam. Ba 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 ba. Yeah, the trumpets, filter trumpets through letterpads that just screams MF Doom. You know? Let's mess around with it, and then we're gonna do a little finger drumming thing, because nothing is more fake than a beat on the grid. Because we don't want that. What we want is we want it to swing hard, like we want it to swing like like Art Tatum, like Jay Dilla, like Ella Fitzgerald. We want it to hibbity hobbity. We want the we want that. We want shuffle, we want swing, we want grit. We want personality, we want imperfection. We want it unquantized. We need it unquantized. It should be tidy, but it should not be quantized. And actually, it doesn't even need to be tidy. You just need to be able to work with it. The more you do microsampling, the less the timing of the source material really matters. Like, especially like consider you put your sample on 0 speed playback. What's it gonna be? It's going to be a stationary thing. You can make a note out of it. If you have keyboard tracking on, every grain becomes a playable instrument, if you want it to be like that. So anyway, long story short, let's mess with our thing a little bit and put a little grimy thing below that, and then we see if we can be satisfied for a second, and then I'll take a break and we're gonna do more of this. Ba, 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 ba. This feels like MF Doom is going to stage. I can feel it. And with all the shit that we have on the sample bus, we can go nuts. We could sample this back into grain with messing with the headroom like so. See how dirty that sounds? It sounds like this tape has been in a fucking microwave. But we can't use it like that. Let's turn that back because we are not madman. Somewhat, but not totally. It may be distorted, but it needs to be musically distorted. We do not want ear fatigue. That is very important. With all the saturation, compression, and harmonic shenanigans, whatever you do, clip the hell out of it, but make sure you are not exposing yourself and others to ear fatigue with extreme frequencies, especially high-end harshness. That can happen very quickly, especially with tape hiss and whatnot. That is also why, as I have tape on every bus and every track, it accumulates so fast. That is why noise is off, for instance. It will just add up too crazy. A little goes a long way. Now it's grimy though. Let's pitch it up for a change. Ooh, I like that too. Maybe it's even better. Ooh, we can do the most messed up shit with this. Let's play. Let's play a little bit. We're gonna record a little bit of random everything, and we're gonna find something. We're gonna do this first sample without anything, and then we'll find out what we can do with finger drumming. Let's play. Let's just play. Mess with it. It's too loud. I like it super screwed. Yeah, we probably could do a little bit more damage with Serato. That way I could find my chops faster. We're gonna do something fast and dirty. I really have to get some in my belly. Maybe we're gonna use more chops so we have more moments. Especially actually like the more you turn down your tempo, probably the more slices you want, because you want more moments, so to speak. I don't know. It's up to you. Maybe we're gonna get this click in the game for a little bit. I feel too free. find better chops. Something like that, and then we do finger drumming on top of that. You know what I'm saying? You know how we do. You know. Exactly like so. Waiting for something somewhat steady in this impromptu flip. You get the idea. I gotta I gotta do something in my food box. I wish you happy creating, happy practice. Make something nice and funky and mellow. Catch you later. Peace. Yeah, it's messed up all kinds of ways, but I think there's some very usable stuff in there. Peace.